The Galactic Council was a place of power and control, a grand meeting hall where representatives from hundreds of species across the galaxy gathered to discuss matters of war, peace, and the future. It was a place of tradition, with rules that had been followed for millennia. The Council's chamber, located on the ancient capital planet, was filled with representatives from different planets, each with their own interests and agendas. But today, something felt different. The usual calm of the Council was disturbed by rumors. Rumors of a new power rising in the galaxy. Humanity, a species that had only recently begun to explore the stars, had sent a signal. No one knew what it meant, but one thing was clear. It was bold. Too bold. Some members of the Council, particularly the more aggressive alien factions, were already nervous. They whispered about a new battleship that humanity had built, one that was bigger and more powerful than anything they had seen before. The news had spread quickly. It was everywhere. Whispers in the halls of the Council, reports from the military outposts, and classified files that had somehow leaked to the public. The ship, they said, was on its way. No one knew when it would arrive, but its very presence was a threat. Some believed it was just a show of force. Others feared that humanity was preparing for war. At the center of the room sat the High Counselor, an ancient alien with skin like polished stone. He cleared his throat, signaling for silence. The murmurs died down, and all eyes turned toward him. "We are gathered here today to discuss matters of great importance," he began, his voice deep and commanding. "However, there is one issue that cannot wait. The humans have arrived in our space, and we must decide how to deal with them." The Council fell silent. For a moment, there was only the hum of the chamber's lights. It wasn't fear that filled the air, at least not yet. It was confusion. Humanity had only just begun to make its mark on the galaxy. Their ships were small compared to the mighty fleets of the Council. How could they pose any real threat? A representative from the Zarkani, a fierce and proud species known for their military might, stood up. "We should send a fleet to intercept them. Teach them that they cannot simply walk into our territory." But the High Counselor shook his head slowly. "We cannot be so hasty. We need to know what they want first. This is a delicate matter." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The representatives of the peaceful species were hesitant to escalate things. They had always preferred diplomacy over force. And so, the Council decided to wait. They would send scouts to monitor the human battleship, gather more intelligence, and report back. But deep down, they knew that this could be the beginning of something much bigger. The balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift, and no one was sure how to handle it. This part sets up the story's conflict, highlighting the confusion and uncertainty the Galactic Council feels toward humanity's unexpected rise. It uses simple language and builds the tension gradually. The Council had barely finished their meeting when the first sign of the human battleship appeared on the radar. It was only a small dot at first, but it was moving fast, too fast to be ignored. Scouts who had been sent to track it reported that it was heading straight for the Galactic Council's space station, cutting through previously secure zones with ease. The reports caused immediate panic among the Council members. A few of the more conservative factions, who had believed the humans were no threat, were now beginning to question their assumptions. The battleship was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its design was sleek, with sharp lines and massive engines, far more advanced than the small scout ships humanity had used until now. No one could understand how they had managed to build such a ship so quickly. "Impossible," said a representative from the Valteri, a species known for its advanced engineering. "This cannot be the work of a primitive species. They must have help from someone." Another member, an older, wiser representative from the Atheron system, frowned. "Or they simply worked harder than we gave them credit for. Humans are known for their resilience." The tension in the room was palpable. The Council, once united in their view of humanity as a minor threat, now found themselves facing the reality that they may have underestimated Earth's potential. The ship's approach was swift, and there were no signs of it slowing down. It was a clear message. Humanity wasn't afraid to challenge the galactic powers. The High Counselor stood from his seat, his eyes scanning the room, his face unreadable. We cannot allow them to enter our space without a response. Prepare the defenses. I will not let the Council be caught off guard. A representative from the Suvani species, known for their diplomatic prowess, spoke up. We must reach out to them. We cannot simply assume their intentions are hostile. The High Counselor's expression hardened. They are heading directly for us, Suvani. No communication, no warning. Their actions speak louder than words. In a panic, the Council dispatched multiple ships to surround the human battleship. But despite their efforts, the human vessel continued on its path, unaffected by the warning signals and military ships closing in on it. The human ship's arrival was nothing short of a spectacle. The way it cut through space with such precision was awe-inspiring, but also terrifying. It was clear that this was not just some simple ship. It was a symbol of power, a show of force that made the galaxy's most experienced military leaders uneasy. On board the human battleship, Captain Alden Cross observed the situation from his command deck. He had expected resistance, but this was different. The Galactic Council, the very heart of galactic power, was scrambling. And in that chaos, humanity had a chance to reshape the entire galaxy. Captain Cross knew that humanity's arrival was more than just an announcement of strength. It was a statement. He had been given command of this fleet for a reason, to ensure that humanity's place in the galaxy was undeniable. Now, it was time to see if the galaxy was ready to accept the new order. This part sets the stage for the arrival of the human battleship and the immediate reaction from the Galactic Council. It builds the tension, introducing the uncertainty and fear that begins to take hold as the humans demonstrate their power. Simple language is used to keep the narrative clear and engaging. The Galactic Council was in disarray. Representatives from every species were speaking over one another, trying to make sense of the human battleship's sudden arrival. There was no time to waste. The Council needed answers. What were the humans really after? In the war room, the tension was thick. Alien strategists, diplomats, and military leaders crowded around the table, their voices rising and falling in heated debate. Some argued that humanity was bluffing, trying to scare the Council into compliance. Others feared that the humans were only the first wave of something far greater, perhaps a full invasion. "We must understand what they want," said Dural, a representative from the technologically advanced Vecran species. His voice was calm, but his sharp eyes betrayed his growing concern. "Their technology is beyond anything we've seen before. We cannot assume this is just an isolated ship. We need to find out if they are aligned with any other factions." "I disagree," countered Jarnock, a war-hardened commander from the Kolfar system. "If we wait to find out what they want, it may be too late. We need to take action now, or we will lose all control." The High Counselor, sitting at the head of the room, raised a hand, silencing the arguments. He leaned forward, his ancient face unreadable. "The Vecran have a point. We cannot act on fear alone. We must gather intelligence." Just as he spoke, a new report came through, flashing on the holographic screens around the room. The human battleship had sent a message, a direct transmission to the entire galaxy. It was brief, blunt, and filled with confidence. "We do not negotiate. We dominate." The message was chilling. No attempts at diplomacy, no formal introduction, just a declaration of power. "How dare they?" shouted one of the Zarkani representatives, a tall alien with reptilian features. "This is an insult to all of us." "They're testing us," said a quiet voice from the back of the room. It was Ryona, a young diplomat from the peaceful Pelori species. Her tone was calm, but her eyes reflected the fear many were feeling. "They want to see how we react. If we respond with aggression, we prove their point. If we submit, we show our weakness." A long silence followed her words. The Council members exchanged uncertain glances, realizing she might be right. The humans were not just testing their military strength, they were testing their willpower. What do we know about them? The High Counselor asked, his voice deep and thoughtful. Where do they come from? The Council's intelligence officers quickly brought up data on humanity. Earth, a small, relatively young planet in the Milky Way, had long been overlooked by the other species of the galaxy. They had been considered primitive, their technology only recently catching up to interstellar travel. But what stood out was humanity's rapid progress. They were isolated until just a few centuries ago, said the lead intelligence officer. But they have advanced faster than any species we've ever encountered. Their military is powerful, but their economy, their technology, everything is evolving at an extraordinary pace. So they've been preparing for this, the High Counselor mused. We've underestimated them for too long. The Council had to face an uncomfortable truth. Humanity was not the weak, naive species they had once assumed. They had risen quickly, and now they were making it clear they wouldn't be intimidated. The galaxy had to choose: adapt to humanity's growing power or risk being left behind. The choice, it seemed, was no longer in their hands. This part deepens the Council's understanding of humanity, moving from confusion to the realization that humanity is not to be underestimated. The theories about humanity's rise and the direct message from the human battleship create an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty. It uses simple language to maintain clarity and engagement. The Galactic Council was no longer the calm, powerful body it had once been. With the human battleship now just a few light years away, fear began to spread among the representatives. No one had expected humanity to come so far so fast. They had always assumed that the humans were just another young species, still struggling to find their place in the galaxy. But now, it seemed the humans had come to make a statement. I told you we should have acted sooner, said Jarnock, the Kolthar commander, his voice filled with frustration. We can't let them just walk into our space like this. They've crossed the line. Calm down, Jarnock, Dural replied, his voice steady. We don't even know their intentions yet. We need to approach this carefully. A hasty decision could lead to war. But Jarnock wasn't convinced. His species, the Kolthar, were known for their aggression and might in battle. He had always believed that the strongest should lead, and the humans, with their huge battleship and bold message, were clearly aiming to take control. They're not interested in peace, Jarnock growled. They want to dominate us. They made that clear in their message. The room fell silent. No one could deny that the humans had sent a clear message. We do not negotiate. We dominate. It was a declaration that sent chills through every representative present. In the peaceful sectors of the galaxy, the idea of domination was unthinkable. But in the aggressive parts of the galaxy, where strength was everything, it was a challenge. Ryona, the Pelori diplomat, stood up, her voice soft but filled with conviction. We have to try a different approach. The humans are not like us. We can't treat them the way we would any other species. If we go to war, it will be catastrophic. We should try diplomacy. Her suggestion was met with mixed reactions. Some agreed, recognizing that the human battleship was not just a military threat, but also a sign of their determination. Others, like the Zarkani representative, were less optimistic. The humans are stubborn, the Zarkani said. They won't back down. I doubt diplomacy will work with them. They've already shown us they don't care for our ways. The High Counselor, who had been silent through most of the discussions, finally spoke. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of centuries of leadership. We must be cautious. It's clear that humanity has power, but power alone does not make a ruler. We must understand them. We must decide what kind of power they really hold. The council debated late into the night, and yet no consensus was reached. Some still wanted to act quickly and send a fleet to confront the human ship. Others felt that rushing into war would only lead to disaster. Meanwhile, outside the council's halls, the human battleship was steadily advancing. It had not slowed its course, and there was still no sign of any communication beyond the initial message. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council was divided. Some called for action, others called for patience, but no matter what path they chose, they knew one thing: the arrival of the humans had changed everything. This part builds on the growing tension within the Galactic Council. The fear and uncertainty are evident as the members argue over what action to take, and the story continues to emphasize the humans' confidence and strength. The simple language helps to keep the story clear and engaging. The human battleship had arrived. Its massive silhouette loomed over the Galactic Council's space station, casting a shadow over everything. Despite the Council's efforts to prepare, no one was ready for what was about to happen. There had been no response to their calls for diplomacy, no attempt from the humans to make peace. And now, they were face to face with the embodiment of humanity's power. Inside the control room of the Galactic Council's space station, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Military officers and strategists stood at their stations, monitoring the human ship's every move. The tension was unbearable. Could they stop it? Could they prevent a war? Every second felt like a countdown to something inevitable. The High Counselor stood by the large viewing window, his eyes fixed on the enormous ship outside. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his face showed no emotion, but his mind was racing. Humanity was unpredictable, but he hadn't expected this. The ship was unlike anything the Council had ever seen, sleek, imposing, and clearly designed for war. It wasn't just a ship, it was a message. "We've sent every possible communication," one of the officers said nervously. "There's still no response. They're not answering." The High Counselor turned slowly to face the officer. "What do you suggest we do?" "We can't wait any longer," the officer said. "We need to act. We need to show them that we're not afraid." The High Counselor remained silent for a moment, staring at the human battleship through the glass. His mind was conflicted. On one hand, humanity's power was undeniable, but on the other, the galaxy had always operated under a system of diplomacy, not brute force. At that very moment, a broadcast blared across the entire galaxy, cutting through all channels. It was a direct transmission from the human battleship. The message was clear and direct. "We are humanity. We do not negotiate. We dominate." The words echoed through the room, sending shivers down the spines of everyone present. The human captain, Alden Cross, had made it clear. Humanity wasn't here to make deals or seek allies. They were here to claim their place in the galaxy, and they would take it by force if necessary. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. This was not what they had expected. Some were already scrambling to formulate a response, but deep down, everyone knew that the situation was far from simple. If they responded with force, they risked starting a galactic war. But if they submitted to humanity's demands, they would lose their authority and control over the galaxy. In the control room, the officers began preparing for the worst. Ships were readied, defenses were activated, but there was an overwhelming sense of powerlessness in the air. The humans had shown up, uninvited, with no warning, and now they held all the cards. Back aboard the human battleship, Captain Cross stood calmly at his command center. He wasn't worried. The galaxy was full of powerful species, but humanity had one thing they didn't: determination. And determination would take humanity to the top, whether the galaxy liked it or not. "Prepare for the next step," Captain Cross ordered. "Let's see if they're willing to negotiate." This part escalates the tension, with the Council struggling to understand and react to the power and boldness of humanity, the humans' unyielding attitude, and their direct message to the galaxy only deepen the crisis, keeping the narrative interesting and suspenseful. The simple language continues to make the story easy to follow. The High Counselor paced slowly around the room, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. The message from the human battleship echoed in his mind, growing louder with every passing second. "We do not negotiate. We dominate." It had been a simple statement, but it was impossible to ignore. Every species in the Galactic Council was now faced with a hard truth. The humans were not here to play by the rules. They had come to take control, and they wouldn't back down. "We cannot let this go unanswered," said Jarnock, the Kolthar commander, his voice sharp with anger. "The humans are testing us. If we don't strike now, they will think we are weak. The entire galaxy will fall under their rule." "Calm down, Jarnock," Dural, the Vecron representative, replied. His tone was much more measured. "We must not act out of fear. The situation is delicate. A rash decision could lead to war. But we cannot ignore them," Jarnock growled. "They've already shown us who they are. If we don't respond, the Council will fall apart. This is a fight for our future." The room fell into silence. Every representative of the Galactic Council knew that Jarnock was right. If they didn't act, they risked losing everything. But the question was, what action should they take? A quiet voice from the back of the room interrupted the argument. It was Ryona, the young diplomat from the Pelori species. She had been listening carefully, and now she spoke up. "What if we try diplomacy again?" Yes, their message was harsh, but it's clear they want something. "Maybe we can find a way to meet their demands without going to war." "You think we can talk to them after they've insulted us?" a Zarkani representative hissed. "They've made it clear that they see us as nothing more than obstacles." Ryona's eyes remained calm. "I'm not saying it will be easy, but what if their message was just a test? What if they're waiting to see how we respond?" The High Counselor, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "Ryona has a point. We cannot afford to make assumptions. Humanity's ways are different from ours, but that doesn't mean they are entirely unreasonable. We must try again to communicate." Jarnock wasn't convinced, but the High Counselor's word was final. "Prepare a new message. Let us see if diplomacy can work, but we are ready if it fails." The message was sent. The Galactic Council, for the first time in history, was going to attempt to communicate with the humans on their terms. The High Counselor's words echoed in everyone's mind. "We must adapt to humanity's strength, or risk losing everything." Hours passed. The minutes felt like days. As the Council waited for a response, each representative struggled with the fear of the unknown. Would the humans reply, or would they launch an attack? It was a gamble, but the Council had no choice. They had to try to avoid war. Then, at last, the response came. It was another broadcast from the human battleship. This time, the tone was different. Instead of a declaration of power, the message seemed curious. "We've heard your response. You have shown more patience than we expected. Let's see if you are worthy of our respect." The galaxy held its breath. The game had changed. Humanity had given them a chance to prove themselves, but it came with a heavy price. They had to prove their strength. This part builds on the tension within the Galactic Council as they faced the choice of whether to continue with diplomacy or go to war. Ryona's suggestion to try diplomacy adds a sense of hope, while the uncertainty of the response from humanity keeps the story engaging and filled with suspense. Simple language ensures the story remains clear and easy to follow. The days following the human battleship's second message were tense. The Galactic Council waited, unsure of what would come next. Would the humans honor their promise of respect, or was this just another test? Every representative felt the weight of the moment. The fate of the galaxy seemed to hang in the balance. The High Counselor paced restlessly in his private chambers. Despite his years of experience and wisdom, he had never faced a situation like this. Humanity was unpredictable, and their message, though different this time, still carried an undeniable warning. The Council had been given a chance to prove their strength, but how? And to whom? "Do you really think they will let us live in peace?" Jarnock's voice interrupted his thoughts. The Kolthar commander had always been eager for action. He was eager for battle, convinced that strength was the only language the humans understood. "I don't know," the High Counselor replied, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "But we must try. If we move too quickly, we risk destroying everything." Elsewhere, in the heart of the Galactic Council's space station, The tension was growing. On every screen and communication channel, military officers prepared for what was to come. Ships were ready for battle, and weapons were powered up, but there was still no word from the human fleet. Just then, an unexpected transmission came through, interrupting the quiet tension that had settled in. It was from Captain Alden Cross, the human leader, his image projected across every screen in the room. His face was calm, confident, and his eyes betrayed no hint of fear. His words, however, carried an unmistakable message. "We've been watching you," Captain Cross said in his calm, steady voice. "You've shown restraint, but now we need to see your true strength. If you want to prove that you deserve our respect, then show us what you're made of. We will wait." The message sent a shockwave through the council. Captain Cross's words were simple, but they were filled with a challenge that no one in the room could ignore. The humans weren't backing down. They weren't waiting for the council to make up its mind. They were daring the galaxy to prove itself. The High Counselor knew that this was the moment. It was no longer about negotiations or diplomacy. The humans had made it clear that they respected strength, and they wanted the council to show it. "We cannot back down," the High Counselor said, his voice more firm than before. "It's time to show them that we will not be intimidated." He turned to the military officers standing nearby. "Prepare a demonstration of our power. Show them that we are not afraid." And so, the council did something they had never done before. They ordered a grand display of power, a show of military might that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. A massive fleet was assembled, and weapons that had long been dormant were brought to life. The fleet, with hundreds of ships from all corners of the galaxy, moved out into the depths of space. The human battleship, watching from afar, responded. Without warning, they fired a single shot. It cut through the silence of space, hitting a nearby asteroid with such force that it shattered into 1,000 pieces. The message was clear. This was just a glimpse of their strength. As the Council's fleet prepared to take their stand, they realized something. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy. The humans had given them a choice. Show your power or submit. The outcome of this confrontation would determine the future of the galaxy itself. This part intensifies the stakes with the human ship daring the Galactic Council to prove their strength. The tense buildup and the eventual demonstration of power creates a sense of urgency, keeping the reader on edge. The simple language makes the events easy to follow while still maintaining the excitement of the story. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The Council had given their answer. Their fleet, now gathered in full force, was ready to confront the humans and prove their strength. The massive ships moved through space like a wall of power, each vessel armed to the teeth with advanced weapons. But the human battleship stood unmoving, silent, and still, waiting for the Council to make its move. Inside the Council's war room, every representative knew this was a moment of no return. They had never been pushed to this point before. The galaxy was watching, and every decision would echo throughout history. Some members felt certain that they had to act decisively. If they didn't show their power now, they would be seen as weak. But others, like Ryona from the Pelori species, still believed that diplomacy could work. "Is this really the only way?" Ryona asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "Do we have to go to war with them? Surely there must be another way." Diral, the Vecran strategist, shook his head. "Their challenge is clear. We must show them that we will not back down. If we do nothing, we risk losing all respect. The galaxy will see us as weak." "But at what cost?" Ryona pressed, her eyes scanning the room. "A war will only bring destruction. We must think about the future. Do we want to keep fighting for control, or do we want to find a way to coexist?" A High Counselor stood up, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the map of the galaxy on the screen before him. He had heard both sides of the argument, but he knew what had to be done. The humans had made it clear that they would not be ignored, and now it was time for the Council to decide. Would they fight, or would they bend to humanity's power? We cannot afford to waste any more time, the High Counselor said, his voice calm but firm. The humans have made their challenge clear. We must respond. If we back down now, we risk losing everything. The decision was made. The fleet would advance, and the Council would show its strength. But even as they prepared for battle, there was an uneasy sense of doubt in the air. No one was certain how this would end. The human battleship had already demonstrated its power. Was the galaxy truly prepared for what might come next? The fleet moved forward, each ship gliding through space with precision and speed. The human battleship remained where it was, silent and unmoving. The tension in the air was palpable. For hours, the two forces circled each other, waiting for the first shot to be fired. But the humans didn't make a move. They simply watched. Captain Alden Cross stood at the helm of the human battleship, his eyes fixed on the approaching fleet. His mission was clear: show the galaxy that humanity would not be ignored, that they were no longer just a small, isolated species. They had come to claim their place in the galaxy, and they wouldn't back down. "Are they waiting for us to fire first?" a crew member asked nervously. "No," Captain Cross replied, his voice steady. "They are waiting to see if we will." And with that, he gave the order. Fire. A single shot from the human battleship ripped through the silence of space. It wasn't aimed at the Council's fleet, but the message was clear. Humanity would not be intimidated. They had shown their strength. Now, it was up to the galaxy to decide how to respond. This part builds up to the intense moment of decision for the Galactic Council as they prepare for a confrontation with humanity. The tension between diplomacy and strength continues, and the humans' resolve is clear. The simple language keeps the story accessible while building suspense, and the galaxy was on the edge of chaos. The human battleship had fired its warning shot, but no one had expected what came next. The Galactic Council's fleet had been prepared for battle, but now it was clear that humanity was not going to be easily intimidated. The Council had shown their power, and the humans had responded with force, but neither side had made the first aggressive move. Yet, as the fleet of Council ships continued to hover near the human battleship, a strange stillness hung in the air. The stars twinkled in the vastness of space, but the tension was palpable. The Council's fleet, now fully assembled and ready to fight, waited for the next move. But humanity had already made their statement. They were strong, resolute, and unwilling to back down. Inside the Council's war room, the mood was tense. The representatives from all the different species sat in silence, their eyes glued to the holographic displays. Some were worried that war was inevitable. Others, like Ryona, still hoped that they could find a way to end this peacefully. The question remained: could they find a way to make peace with humanity, or would they be forced to engage in a battle they were not sure they could win? The High Counselor stood in front of the hologram, staring at the massive human battleship. His mind raced as he weighed the possible outcomes. They had no clear answer. Humanity's actions had shown they were a force to be reckoned with, but the cost of war would be high. The galaxy was already divided, and the war could shatter everything. "Do we continue to fight, or do we try to find another way?" asked Ryona, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, but filled with determination. "If we go to war with them, we risk losing everything. But if we don't respond, we show weakness." The High Counselor looked at her, his expression grave. "There is no simple answer. We must understand humanity, but we must also protect the galaxy from the unknown. They are powerful, and we cannot ignore their strength." Charnock, the Kolthar commander, was growing impatient. "We've wasted enough time. The humans have made their move, and now we must respond. If we don't, we lose our place in the galaxy. Show them our might." The room fell into silence again. The debate was fierce, but everyone knew one thing: time was running out. The humans had made their intentions clear, and the Council's response would determine the future of the galaxy. Suddenly, the High Counselor raised his hand, signaling for everyone to quiet down. His decision was made. "Prepare the fleet," he said, his voice unwavering. "We will meet them in the open. We will show them the strength of the Galactic Council, but we will not attack unless we are forced to. Let us prove that we can lead with both power and wisdom." The fleet, which had been poised for battle, now began to move in formation. The human battleship, still silent in the distance, waited. It was as if both sides were locked in a silent dance, each waiting for the other to make the first move. The galaxy's future was on the line. The High Counselor knew that this was the moment. They had shown their strength. Now it was up to humanity to decide how this conflict would unfold. Would the humans back down? Or would the Council be forced to engage in a battle that could tear the galaxy apart? This part explores the internal conflict within the Galactic Council, as they must choose between war and diplomacy. Tension builds, and the decision to prepare for battle adds urgency. The human strength remains undeniable, and the Council's response will define the galaxy's future. The simple language ensures the focus stays on the growing drama and tension. The stars outside the war room window were quiet, almost as if they too were waiting for the inevitable. The fleets of the Galactic Council and the human battleship had drawn closer, the tension thick in the air. It felt like the entire galaxy was holding its breath, waiting to see which side would make the next move. The High Counselor stood in front of the map of the galaxy, his eyes focused on the approaching human fleet. He knew that today would change everything. Whatever decision the Council made now would echo across the universe for generations. The power balance was shifting, and humanity was at the center of it all. "We are at a crossroads," the High Counselor said, his voice steady, though his mind was racing. "We can choose to fight, or we can choose to adapt." Jarnock, the Kolthar commander, stood nearby. His eyes narrowed in suspicion. "We've waited long enough. It's time to show the humans that we won't back down." "But at what cost?" Ryona asked, her voice calm but filled with concern. "A war will destroy everything. The galaxy has always relied on diplomacy. This is a new way of doing things, and we must learn to understand it." A High Counselor nodded, acknowledging her point, but he knew that sometimes diplomacy wasn't enough. The message humanity had sent, "We do not negotiate, we dominate," could not be ignored. It was clear that humanity wanted to establish itself as a dominant force in the galaxy. The question was, could the Council let them? "We cannot risk the future of the galaxy by showing weakness," the High Counselor said at last, his voice firm. "But we will not engage unless forced. Let's give humanity a chance to prove their intentions." As the Council fleet moved into position, Captain Alden Cross watched it all unfold from his command deck. He had been prepared for this moment, but that didn't make it any less important. His mission was clear: show the galaxy that humanity could no longer be overlooked. The human battleship remained silent as the two fleets drew closer. Neither side made a move. The waiting game continued. Then Captain Cross made his decision. He gave the order to fire, but not in an act of aggression. A single shot rang out, but it was not aimed at the Council's fleet. Instead, it hit an uninhabited planet on the outer rim, sending a wave of energy across the barren surface. The blast wasn't destructive. It was a demonstration of power, a reminder of what humanity could do. The message was clear: humanity had arrived, and they would not be ignored. They had shown restraint, but they were ready to take control if necessary. The Council watched, stunned. This wasn't a declaration of war, but it was an undeniable statement. Humanity had proven that they had the strength to back up their words. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, the High Counselor turned to face the room. "This is a new era," he said quietly. "The galaxy has never seen anything like this. Humanity will not be denied. But perhaps we can learn to coexist. Together, we can build a new future." The Council had made their decision. The fleets would return, and humanity would be recognized. But the galaxy was no longer the same. The humans had shown their power, and now the Council had to find a way to work with them or risk being left behind. A new chapter had begun. This part wraps up the story with a decisive moment where humanity proves its strength, and the Council has no choice but to accept it. The tension dissolves into a realization that the galaxy must adapt, setting the stage for a new era. The simple language keeps the focus on the pivotal decisions and the shift in the balance of power.